All right, well, we have an opportunity for you all to ask them questions. One of my favorite parts of this event is to hear reflections from the audience and to have our community partners and students respond, because they can only give you so much in the short presentation that they have. So if you do have a question, Karthik is going to be out in the back, and volunteers will bring the microphone to you so that you can ask a question. Do we have anyone that has a question ready? Just raise your hand. Okay, we have someone over here.
So this question's for the CAP team. It seemed like kind of a footnote in the presentation, but I just want y'all to tell me more about the data scraping y'all did, or web scraping, excuse me. Because I've worked with Florida Department of Education data for a while, and that sounds like a crazy undertaking. So if you could just describe that a little more.
Thank you for the question. That was definitely the most time-consuming part of the project. The Florida DOE information, as you know, is organized in a series of tableaus, web-embedded tableaus. And one of the problems we ran into is that all of the data at the school level was aggregated across all of the schools selected. So we had to go through one at a time. And we created essentially a Tableau probe for each of the Tableau sites. And then we went through sequentially on each school and had to scrape each page each instance of the page. So we ended up doing that for each of the 206 schools, and then we had to stitch all of that together. So that was like a 4-week process, right? So lots of fun.
Hi, hello. This question is also for the CAP team. First, I want to say to all of y'all, I thought you did a wonderful job with the presentations. One of the things I particularly appreciated was you went beyond just this is what the data show, but this is what the data mean. That was really great. And for the CAP team in particular, those quotes at the end just were so heartwarming with what the kids were responding. Saying that, you guys were showing the difference between the Braveheart schools and then the other schools. How were you able to differentiate the effect that CAP had on those schools, specifically to affect attendance and I can't remember the other one, and other factors that might be present within those particular schools?
First of all, thank you very much for the question. It was difficult to do that because there are obviously a lot of different factors that can go into play for attendance and performance. First of all, when we were looking at all the schools in the district, there were some that were obviously going to skew the results, like so-called last chance schools or virtual schools. And we essentially filtered each of the analyses down to the schools that were most similar to each of these Braveheart schools. In fact, we didn't mention it in the presentation, but we actually did some clustering around each of the schools. And the schools that were most close to it across demographics and performance and funding were the ones that we did some of our higher end comparisons against.
Well, I have a question for our community partners. So as a nonprofit organization, data is not always like the first thing that you think about when you show up to work in the morning. And so I'm kind of curious about how you prioritize looking at data and working at data within your organization. What is that process like? What do you have to do to make sure that that continues to be at the forefront?
Well, at LISC, I think we start with people who have experiences, and so we have stories, and then we use those to really start the data work. Because what the data can do in these kinds of models is that it can make us very efficient about outreach, and it can and funders appreciate that kind of efficiency. When you have massive systemic issues, you need to be able to target and have good uptake percentages on your work. So that's really how we focus our data work.
I think we're in a unique situation being a community foundation that we do get asked about data a lot. We get asked questions that data can support. And so we started our data journey really in 2020, into 2019, to really be able to answer questions that our donors were asking and local funders were asking in the community. And so we really have to make sure that we're answering those questions responsibly and being able to have the data to show what is going on in our community, where are there gaps, and how can we best support our community.
So just like many of our community partners, same thing, our data is used for, well, one purpose, obviously for our funding, our funders, to show them the work and to substantiate the funding. But also for us, what we've been able to do in the last 3 years, we've been able to look at our Hope Scale survey, and we've tried to, every 3 months, try to administer a Hope Scale with our parents so that we can kind of see a progression, or maybe see any challenges or any issues that may be coming up. And so, so that was the extent of what we were doing. But, you know, like I mentioned earlier, we just wanted to do a deeper dive and to look at it from a longitudinal approach, you know, which we've been able to do through this project. So this has definitely extended, given us some more legs, you know, to see it from a different lens.
So my answer is to work with DSSG. They have been our partners for over, I believe, close to 5 years, and that has been a incredible journey. And I see some of the past alums who has helped us with our projects here as well. It started as designing a survey to understand the access gaps in the arts in schools, and through that we looked at where the needs are, and we found that field trips help students, especially those in the urban core. Then we use that to find programs and work with the city to have the resources in allowing students to actually go to different museums and different sites. We then designed something that's called Principal of the Arts Award, which is an award to recognize arts educators who become champions for having arts in their schools. And just before coming here today, I got a chance to share this work with the Getty Museum. If you're not familiar with them, they're the world's most well-funded museum, along with partners from Chicago, Houston. And when I shared that we work with UNF and with DSSG, they went, wow, you guys have an incredible data collection. And I said, well, that's because we're here in Jacksonville. So one little plug, Jacksonville, we have to work with DSSG.
So, other questions?
Hi, I have a couple questions for the presenters who did the Center of Hope. For one, I'm curious if the Hope scores were only collected after the parent cafes?
Yes, the Hope scores were actually collected during the parent cafes. There were pre and post Hope scores. So before the parent cafe programs, we collected we took a survey of the participants, and after the survey as well, we took a survey of the participants, and then we measured them together, and that's how we got the 10% increase from baseline.
And then the second question was, did you have any qualitative data, and if so, did that help inform any of your analyses?
Sorry, could you ask that one more time?
The question is, did you have any qualitative data, and if so, did that help inform any analyses?
Yes, we had a lot of qualitative data. So we were sent a lot of grant proposals and general community anecdotes from individuals, and that definitely shaped how we viewed the entire project and the direction that we took with the data, because data needs to have some conceptual backing to make sense. So that gave us that conceptual backing to make sense out of the data.
Thank you.
I got a question for you. My name is Justin. I work as a data scientist. So you cracked the joke. Maybe we don't think about working with data first thing in the morning, and I think a lot of the people on that stage maybe do. So before I ask any questions, I want to take a moment and congratulate all of you. You did a really amazing job, and I want to take a moment to give you another round of applause. You guys really did awesome. Congratulations. I'm impressed. So this question's for anyone on the stage. I think for me as a data person, right, we tackle a project, and right from day one, we're like, okay, this is going to be the hard part, right? And you have an idea. And maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong. But whatever happens, you encounter some problem you weren't expecting. And it ends up being much more challenging than you might have originally anticipated. I'm wondering, what challenges you guys might have run into in your projects, and how you navigated those challenges.
Oh, challenges. These guys didn't have any challenges whatsoever, right?
Yeah, I feel like I probably faced one of the biggest challenges of my entire life dealing with this 990 XML data. And honestly, sometimes I felt bad because I assumed it was a shorter process than it is. And I said, oh, I'll have it done, estimate 1 to 2 weeks. And it ended up being like a 6 weeks of failures. But the good news is I learned from it. And I learned that sometimes, even though you put work into something, it's better to transfer over to something else. Yeah.
Sure. So I think as data scientists, or at least I start this project with an ideal data set in mind. Like, I need these rows and these columns, and they will tell me exactly what properties is qualified for exemption or not. And a week after that, I realized that's impossible. And a lot of moments like these happen, and I think one thing I learned is to ask the right question and continuously be able to change the mindsets. So from wanting to know exactly who has exemption, who not, we think probabilistically, with all the data that we have, what is the best thing that we can say and what can't we say. And that is where we work with LISC, with our community partner, because they then can fill in the gap, while also, again, reminding us who is on the ground and what story we can tell and we can't tell. And just working with that uncertainty has been really important for me.
So for me, not just as a data scientist, but in general life, when I think of moving forward from a problem, I was thinking of the closest analogy to explain it the best, and I thought of rock climbing. And for me, as long as I can get this another piece to drive myself up, I can move forward. And I think what made the difference in this summer project is having partners to rely on. I think I was not alone, and every time I felt like things were getting jumbled in my head because there's so much jargon that I was just completely new to. And so as long as, even unknowingly, as long as my partners could give me something to grapple on and move myself forward, I think we were very supportive in general to each other, and I think that was the key to our success as even data scientists. So yeah.
I would say one of the most important things for me throughout this internship was being able to pivot and adapt to what we're finding ahead of us. Because with each data point we discovered, it was like marching one step forward into the darkness, revealing one more layer of information that might change our entire direction. So being able to take in what you're seeing and being able to pivot on an instant was probably the most useful thing to our group.
I think all of my colleagues have collectively talked about this, but looking at all of the data, it felt like there were different puzzle pieces, and putting them together, especially with Center of Hope, when we put them together and then we realized that substance abuse was one of the highest factors. And then we went ahead and saw what Center of Hope was doing for the community, and then we saw all the services that they were providing. So it was all very interesting, and it all intricately, when we put it together, it was telling a story. So figuring out, learning about these pieces, figuring out how to put them together, and then letting the data tell us the story was something that was very interesting.
I think one of the challenge, I would not say challenge, but when we initially started, our initial discussions like few weeks just went into like to understand like how do we connect this data set. So once we were able to figure out, I felt like the analysis is one part, but what is the question that we are actually trying to solve? Like, was the most important thing that I felt that we understood like through this 12 weeks of program that how, because there are like real people who are impacting with our analysis. So asking the right questions is very important, I feel.
Yes, so I think to echo on what a lot of people have already said, like Wong said, is we kind of started with an idea of how we were going to look into our problem, understanding the art's impact on military children. And then we would get new data, but it wouldn't match the data we already had. So, okay, we can't go down that path. So then, like Brant said, we start to pivot. And then we get more data, we'd get really excited about it. We're like, we could do this, this, and this with it. But then it didn't tie back to our original problem. So just kind of keeping the big picture and the small picture in mind all at the same time.
Like for me, this is not a like challenge I was explaining. Like this is a learning. Like when I started this project, like I have been thinking about directly solution instead of understanding the problem and data. Like and then professors like guided me like even you don't know that what is the problem and what is the data, like you are trying to solve the problem. Then I have and done the research on the problem and understand the data well. Then after they guided me how to approach the solution. This is like learning.
I'm going to echo that understanding the problem and not approaching it as a problem in the beginning was the hardest part to wrap my head around. You really have to let the data tell you the story and then work from there. It's almost like working backwards. You get the whole picture and then you say, okay, what pieces fit?
Thank you.
This question.
First of all, I just wanted to say that I thought you guys did like an amazing job explaining like technical topics in a way that was like easy to understand. This question could be for anybody on the stage. What strategies did you guys use to make like complex information accessible to people who don't have like a technical background?
I would say just the value of visualizations, like things like Tableau and PowerPoint, help convey it in a way that's processable. And something I would do is try to explain it to my family. And if they were able to understand, then everyone should be able to.
I guess for us, even though we had a certain level of background in the technical stuff, I guess I could speak for my team. We weren't like using it in our everyday curriculum, like the models that we used. I literally had to Google their names the first day they were, talked about at the table, and so I guess when it came to presenting to an audience that would, be in the same shoes, it was how did I go about understanding it when I didn't know anything about it, and then presenting it in that sense.
I'm going to address the elephant in the room. We use AI for sure. But in an intentional way that I could say as well. I think when it comes to legal documents, when it comes to technical terms, we ourselves don't even understand everything. And so AI help us take that 0 to 1 step to start wrapping our head around. But we don't just take the word of AI and just, emit it to you. I think an important learning process is take that word and then just process it, learn it ourselves, think about what help us learn, think about the steps that help us understand, and then trying to reteach that to our friends, to our professors, through weekly meetings and then now to the audience. So I think AI is an important part of the process if we use it correctly.
For someone who is like coming from a software engineering background, this was like my first DSG project, and for me the key strategy was like first like just to understand the data as is, and then trying to solve the problem with different like understanding like in depth, like what are each column. Like we had to like go through like what around 637 columns like just for like one data set, but that is like a very important thing. I feel that we need to understand our data correctly. So I think yeah, that was, and also like yeah, we had like immense guidance from our mentors. Like we used to have like our meetings, bi-weekly meetings with our mentors, so they also like guided us. So yeah.
Yeah, so one thing that we do in DSSG is the students will do smaller presentations all throughout the 12-week internship. They get started on that right away. Like their second week, they have to present some ideas to the client, and then the next week they have to present some ideas to the mentors, and they're constantly getting feedback on what works and what doesn't work. So I think it was every week you had a presentation, some days multiple presentations within the same week. So they get a lot of practice in trying to communicate these ideas to different stakeholders. So one for the clients and one for the mentors. There's different things you need to communicate for those different audiences. And so I think that part of how we do the work in DSSG probably help the students think carefully about, okay, how do I want to present this, not just what am I presenting. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much. Thanks to our interns and community partners for sharing their perspectives. So